What time is it where you are right now? Let me know in the comments below because time is the only thing that does not lie. I spent 40 years keeping skyscrapers standing, spotting every crack in the concrete. Yet I was blind to the fracture in my own home. When the builder warned me not to come alone and to bring my daughter Maya, I thought he was crazy. But when that secret door opened, I learned that hell hides behind the fake smile of the child I trusted most. My name is Joseph Williams. I am 66 years old, and I have spent my entire life calculating how much weight a structure can bear before it collapses. I know the exact point where steel yields and where concrete crumbles. I understand the physics of tension and compression better than I understand the beating of my own heart. For 40 years I built skyscrapers that defied the Chicago wind, but I could not see that the foundation of my own life was rotting from the inside out. It has been 8 months since the silence moved into this house. It arrived on the same day the ambulance took Eleanor away, and it never left. The house is a sprawling Victorian build in the suburbs north of Chicago. It is a sturdy structure with good bones and a slate roof that I inspected myself every autumn. But now, without Eleanor filling the rooms with the scent of her lavender tea and the soft rustle of her papers, the house feels like a mausoleum. The heating system rattles in the walls like the breathing of a dying man. Outside, the Chicago winter has settled in early. The wind howls off Lake Michigan and strips the trees bare, leaving them looking like skeletal fingers clawing at the gray sky. I sat in the kitchen drinking black coffee that had gone cold. My gaze drifted to the calendar on the wall. It was still turned to March, the month she died. A massive stroke, the doctor said. Quick, painless. They always say it is painless to comfort the living, but I wonder if she felt the terror of the lights going out. She was only 63. We were supposed to have time. We were supposed to travel to Italy to see the Pantheon, but instead, I am here alone in a house that echoes with the memory of her footsteps. This morning, I finally made a decision. I could not stand the shrine any longer. The basement office where Eleanor spent the last 2 decades of her life had to change. She had been a risk assessor for a major bank, a job that required meticulous attention to detail, and a level of paranoia that I often found exhausting. She spent her days and nights down there surrounded by filing cabinets and stacks of documents calculating the probability of disaster for other people. It was time to clear it out. I wanted to turn that space into a gallery for my architectural models. I have scale replicas of every major project I ever worked on, from the high-rises in the Loop to the suspension bridges in Europe. They deserve to be displayed, not collecting dust in the attic. I hired Frank Kowalski for the job. Frank is a relic of the old world, much like myself. He is a Polish man with hands like shovels and a face carved from granite. We have worked together on a few sites over the years. He does not ask questions, and he does not cut corners. He arrived at 8 in the morning sharp, driving a battered Ford truck that looked like it had survived a war. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," Frank said as he stomped the snow off his boots on the front porch. He was holding a large thermos and a heavy toolbox. "Good morning, Frank," I said, opening the door wide. "It is cold out there. It is Chicago," he replied simply. "The cold keeps us honest." I led him through the house to the basement door. The hinges creaked as I opened it, revealing the wooden stairs that led down into the gloom. The air down there was stale, heavy, with the smell of old paper and damp earth. I flipped the switch and the fluorescent lights flickered to life, buzzing like angry insects. The room was exactly as she had left it. Her desk was organized with military precision, pens aligned by color, notepads stacked by size. The walls were lined with bookshelves that bowed under the weight of binders. It felt like walking into a tomb. "I want it all gone, Frank," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the confined space. "The shelves, the desk, the carpeting. Strip it down to the concrete. I want to install track lighting and display pedestals." Frank nodded his eyes, scanning the room. He walked over to the east wall and tapped on the plaster. "It is a big job," he said. "These old basements have secrets. The moisture barriers are usually shot. Just do it, I said, feeling a sudden surge of irritation. I do not care about the moisture barrier. I just want this room to be mine again. I left him to his work and went back upstairs. I could hear the sounds of him moving furniture, the scrape of wood against wood. I tried to focus on my newspaper, but my mind kept drifting to my daughters. Vivian called me yesterday. She was in New York for a conference. My eldest daughter is a force of nature. At 38, she is a project director for one of the largest real estate development firms in the Midwest. She drives a Porsche, wears Italian suits, and speaks the language of success. When I look at her, I see myself. She has my drive, my ambition, my need for order. She is building the new skyline of Chicago, and I could not be prouder. She apologized for not visiting, saying the market was too volatile, and she had to keep her eye on the ball. I told her I understood. Building empires takes sacrifice. And then there is Maya. My stomach tightened, just thinking about her. Maya is 32, but she lives like a teenager who refuses to grow up. She waits tables at a diner on the South Side and lives in a rented apartment that smells of cat litter and desperation. She has a son, Leo, who is 7 years old. I love the boy, but I cannot look at him without seeing his mother's failures. Maya never finished college. She drifted from one dead-end job to another, always playing the victim, always blaming the world for her poor choices. The last time I saw her was a month ago. It was raining a cold sleet that turned the streets into sheets of ice. She showed up at my door, soaked to the bone, shivering. She did not even have a proper coat, just a thin denim jacket. "Dad," she had said, standing in the entryway, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. "I need help." I had stood there, my arms crossed, feeling the cold draft coming in from the open door. "What is it this time, Maya?" I asked. "Rent car repair. Another bailout. It is Leo," she said, her voice trembling. "He needs braces, Dad. His teeth are coming in crooked, and the dentist says it is causing him pain. It is $3,000. I do not have it. $3,000. It was not a small sum, but I could afford it. I had millions in my retirement accounts. But it was not about the money. It was about the principle. I had bailed her out so many times before. When she crashed her car. When she got evicted. When she needed money for that art course she never finished." "Maya," I said, keeping my voice level and firm. "You are 32 years old. You chose to have a child. You chose to drop out of school. You cannot keep coming to me every time life gets hard." "But it is for Leo," she pleaded, tears welling up in her large dark eyes. Those eyes always reminded me of Eleanor, and that made me angrier. Eleanor always coddled her, always slipped her money when I was not looking. "If you cannot provide for him, maybe you should have thought about that before you left your husband," I said. The words were cruel, I knew that. Her husband had been a loser who ran off when Leo was 2, but I blamed Maya for choosing him in the first place. "I am working double shifts, Dad," she said. "I am trying, please." "No," I said. "I will not enable you anymore. You need to learn self-reliance. You are a leech, Maya. You drain everyone around you because you refuse to stand on your own 2 feet. She had looked at me then with a mixture of shock and hatred that I will never forget. She did not say another word. She just turned around and walked back out into the freezing rain. I watched her get into her rusted Honda and drive away. I felt righteous then. I told myself I was doing the right thing. Tough love. That is what she needed. I shook the memory away and stood up. I needed to check on Frank. The noise from the basement had changed. The rhythmic scraping had been replaced by the heavy thud of a sledgehammer. I went down the stairs. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent light. Frank had cleared the shelves and the desk. The room looked larger now, and strangely naked. He was standing by the east wall, examining a section of drywall he had just smashed open. "Mr. Williams," Frank said without turning around. "You should see this." I walked over. The sledgehammer had punched a hole about 2 feet wide in the plaster. Behind the drywall was not the concrete foundation wall I expected. It was wood, plywood backing. "That is odd," I muttered, stepping closer. Why would she fur out the wall that much? I reached out and touched the plywood. It was high-grade marine plywood, the kind used for outdoor construction, not interior finishing. I peered through the hole. There was a gap behind the plywood, a void space. I remember when Eleanor had this office renovated 10 years ago. She had hired a different contractor, some specialist she found online. She told me she needed soundproofing because she dealt with sensitive client information. I had laughed at her. "Who is going to listen to you in the basement, Eleanor the cat?" I had asked. She had just smiled, that tight, secretive smile of hers. She was always so anxious. She checked the locks on the front door 3 times every night. Check, check, check. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the soundtrack of our evenings. She shredded every piece of mail that had our address on it, even the junk flyers. I used to call it her occupational hazard. Spending all day looking at risk profiles made her see danger in every shadow. "Joseph," she would say when I teased her, "you build things to stand up. I look for the things that make them fall down. We are not so different." But we were different. I believed in transparency, in clear calculations. She believed in shadows. Frank pulled a pry bar from his belt. "Do you want me to keep going?" he asked. I looked at the wall. The dust was settling on my shoulders. I felt a strange unease, a vibration in the air that had nothing to do with the construction. As an engineer, I know that when you cover something up, you usually have a reason. You cover up bad piping. You cover up cracks in the foundation. You cover up mistakes. "Tear it down," I said. Frank nodded. He wedged the pry bar into the hole and heaved. The plywood groaned and splintered. He pulled harder, his shoulder muscles straining under his flannel shirt. With a loud crack, a large section of the false wall came away. I stepped back, coughing in the sudden cloud of dust. When it cleared, I saw what was behind it. It was not just a void space. It was a corridor. A narrow space about 3 feet wide running parallel to the foundation. "What on earth?" I whispered. I stepped closer, peering into the darkness. The smell was different here. It did not smell like old paper. It smelled like ozone and heated electronics. I looked at the concrete foundation wall that was now exposed. As a structural engineer, I could not help but analyze it, even in this moment of confusion. The concrete was gray and pockmarked. I ran my hand over the surface. It was cold and damp. I saw spiderweb cracks running vertically near the floor. Spalling. That is what we call it when the surface of the concrete flakes off due to moisture and pressure. It is a sign of a sick foundation, a sign that the house is shifting, settling into the earth in ways it should not. My house was rotting. The concrete was failing. And my wife had built a false wall to hide something in the space between the rot and the room. Frank shone his flashlight into the gap. "There is something back there," he said, pointing. I squinted. At the far end of the narrow corridor, there was a metal shape. It looked like a door. Not a wooden door, but a steel one. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty basement. I thought I knew every inch of this house. I bought it 30 years ago. I raised my children here. I thought I knew the woman who slept beside me every night. Clear the rest of it, I ordered my voice, sounding remarkably steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Get this wall down, now!" Frank swung the hammer again. The sound was deafening. Smash, smash, smash. It sounded like a bell tolling. Each blow revealed more of the secret. I stood there watching the debris pile up around my feet. I thought about Vivian and her glass tower in New York. I thought about Maya in her damp apartment. And I thought about Eleanor. "Why did you hide this?" I asked the empty air. "What were you afraid of?" The wall came down in chunks. The steel door was fully revealed now. It was heavy industrial. It looked like the entrance to a panic room or a bank vault. And right in the center of it was a digital keypad. I stared at the keypad. It was dead dark. No lights. Frank lowered his hammer. He was breathing hard sweat glistening on his forehead despite the cold. "I have never seen anything like this in a residential job, Mr. Williams," he said, wiping his face with a rag. This is heavy duty. This is serious business. I stepped over the pile of broken drywall and plywood. I reached out and touched the cold steel of the door. It was solid, immovable. I remembered the nights Eleanor would come to bed late. I would wake up and feel the cold radiating off her skin as she slid under the covers. Working late, I would mumble. Just finishing up some files, she would whisper, kissing my cheek. Go back to sleep, Joseph. Everything is fine. Everything was not fine. I looked at Frank. He was staring at the door with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Can you open it? I asked. He shook his head. Not with a hammer. You would need a torch or maybe a drill with diamond bits. Or the code. The code. I looked at the keypad again. I tried to think of numbers. Her birthday. My birthday. The girls' birthdays. Our anniversary. I reached out and pressed the keys. The buttons were stiff. Nothing happened. No beep, no light. The battery must be dead, I thought. Or the power is cut. Suddenly my phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. The sound echoed in the silent basement like a gunshot. I pulled it out. It was a number I did not recognize. Hello, I answered, my eyes still fixed on the steel door. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then a robotic voice spoke. This is an automated message from the Security Monitoring Service. A breach has been detected in Sector 4. Please verify your identity. Sector 4. We did not have a Sector 4. Our alarm system only had 3 zones: front door, back door, windows. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly. Frank, I said, pack up for today. He looked at me surprised. It is only 10 in the morning, Mr. Williams. I know, I said, turning away from the door. But I need to think. Come back tomorrow. Frank shrugged. He was paid by the hour, so he did not care. He started gathering his tools. I walked back upstairs, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the cold coffee down the sink. I looked out the window at the gray sky. The foundation was cracked. The walls were hiding secrets. And for the first time in 40 years, I did not have the calculations to fix it. I was just an old man standing in a cold house, waiting for a storm that had already arrived. I was sitting in a dimly lit conference room at the Hyatt Regency downtown, listening to a man 20 years my junior lecture me on the tensile strength of carbon fiber polymers. It was a structural engineering seminar required for maintaining my license. Though at this stage in my career, I could have taught the course in my sleep. The presenter was pointing at a slide showing load distribution curves, but my mind was miles away, drifting back to the cold basement of my house and the steel door Frank had uncovered yesterday. My phone vibrated against my ribcage, interrupting my thoughts. I ignored it. I am a man who respects protocol, and taking a call during a presentation is the height of rudeness. It buzzed again, then a third time. I frowned and slid it out of my jacket pocket, keeping it below the table surface. It was Frank Kowalski. This was unusual. Frank was a man of few words and even fewer phone calls. If he needed materials, he texted a list. If he was done for the day, he just left. For him to call me in the middle of the afternoon meant something was wrong. I thought about the old wiring in the basement. Had he sparked a fire? Had he hit a water main? I excused myself, sliding past the knees of the other engineers, and stepped out into the carpeted hallway. The air was cooler here and smelled of floor wax. I pressed the phone to my ear. Frank, I said, keeping my voice low. I am in a meeting. This had better be important. Mr. Williams. His voice stopped me cold. Frank Kowalski had a voice like gravel in a cement mixer, rough and steady. But now it was trembling. It was a high, thin sound that did not belong to the man I knew. Mr. Williams, you need to come home right now. What happened? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Did you hit a pipe? No, sir. It is not a pipe. There was a pause on the line, a silence so heavy I could hear the man breathing raggedly on the other end. Mr. Williams, you need to come see what we found. But do not come alone. I frowned. What are you talking about, Frank? Why would I need someone else? Bring your daughter, Frank said. Bring Ms. Maya. My blood pressure spiked instantly. Maya. Of course. It always came back to Maya. I felt a surge of familiar irritation, a hot, prickly heat that rose up the back of my neck. I assumed I knew exactly what had happened. Maya knew I was renovating the basement. She must have stopped by while I was out, probably to beg Frank for scrap metal she could sell. Or worse, she had tried to borrow money from him. She had a way of sniffing out opportunities to embarrass me. Frank, listen to me, I snapped. If she is there bothering you, just kick her out. Tell her I will deal with her later. Do not let her hustle you. No, sir, you do not understand, Frank interrupted, his voice rising in panic. She is not here. Nobody is here but me. But you need to bring her. This involves her life, Mr. Williams. This is about her. The hallway suddenly felt very quiet. The muffled drone of the lecturer inside the conference room seemed to fade away. What did you just say? I asked slowly. Just come home, Frank whispered. And bring her. Please, sir. For your own sake, do not come alone. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment staring at the blank screen of my phone. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Frank was not a dramatic man. He did not play games. If he said it involved Maya's life, he meant it. But the logic of it escaped me. What could possibly be in my dead wife's basement that concerned my estranged daughter? I dialed Maya's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Hello, her voice was breathless, accompanied by the clatter of silverware and the roar of a coffee machine. She was at the diner. It was the middle of the lunch rush. Maya, I said, cutting through the noise. I need you to meet me at the house. Now, Dad. She sounded confused and immediately defensive. I am working a split shift. I cannot just leave. My manager will kill me if I walk out during the rush. I do not care about your manager, I barked. I do not care about your shift. This is an emergency. Is it Leo? Is he okay? Her voice pitched up in panic. It is not Leo, I said, struggling to keep my patience. It is the house, the basement. Frank found something. He says you need to be there. Frank, the builder. Why would he need me? I do not know, Maya, I shouted, drawing a stare from a hotel staff member, pushing a cart of water pitchers. Just get in your car and drive. I will pay you for the shift. I will give you double whatever you make in tips. Just get there. There was a silence on the line. I could imagine her standing there in her grease-stained apron, biting her lip, torn between the fear of losing her job and the fear of disobeying me. Okay, she said softly. I am coming. I hung up and practically ran to the parking garage. The drive from downtown Chicago to the suburbs usually took 45 minutes. I made it in 30. I drove my Mercedes with a reckless aggression, weaving through the midday traffic, ignoring speed limits. My mind was racing faster than the engine. What had Frank found? Drug-stolen goods. Had Maya hidden something in the house years ago? Was that why Eleanor had been so secretive? Had my wife been covering for our daughter's criminal mistakes all this time? The thought made me grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It made perfect sense. Eleanor was always soft on Maya. She always made excuses. She is artistic, Joseph. She is sensitive. If Maya had gotten into trouble, legal trouble, financial trouble, Eleanor would have hidden it. She would have built a wall around it, literally. I pulled into the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. The house looked normal from the outside. The slate roof was gray under the overcast sky. The oak trees stood silent and bare. But Frank's truck was parked haphazardly on the lawn, not in the driveway, as if he had stopped in a hurry. I got out and marched to the front door. It was unlocked. Frank, I called out. I am down here, Mr. Williams. His voice echoed up from the basement hollow and ghostly. I threw my coat on the hallway bench and headed for the stairs. The smell of dust was stronger today, mixed with something metallic like the scent of grinding iron. I went down the steps, my shoes clacking loudly on the wood. Frank was standing in the middle of the room. He looked pale. He was holding a crowbar in one hand, but it hung limp at his side. He had moved the bookshelf. The large, custom-built mahogany unit that had covered the east wall was pulled away, revealing the raw space behind it. Yesterday, we had found a steel door. But today, I saw the context. Frank had stripped away more of the drywall. The steel door was not just a door set into a frame. It was part of a larger structure. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, my engineer's eyes instantly assessing what I was seeing. It was a cage, a reinforced steel cage built directly into the foundation of my house. I walked closer, ignoring Frank. I ran my hand along the exposed metal frame. This was not standard construction steel. This was Type 1 hardened steel, the kind used in high-security government facilities or bank vaults. I saw the cross bracing the heavy rivets, the way the load was distributed into the floor slab. This was not a panic room. A panic room is designed to keep people out. This structure had hydraulic locking pins on the outside. I froze. The pins were 2 inches thick, solid steel cylinders, designed to slide into place and seal the door. And the mechanism to control them was here on the outside. Joseph Frank said, his voice shaking. "Look at the lock." I looked. The keypad we had seen yesterday was merely a cover. Frank had pried it off. Underneath was a complex biometric scanner and a manual override keyhole. But what caught my eye was not the lock itself. It was the manufacturer's stamp on the steel plate. Vance Security Solutions. Grade 5 containment. Grade 5. That was military specification. I turned to Frank. "How long has this been here?" Frank shook his head. "Based on the oxidation on the welds, 5 years. Maybe 6. Someone built this while you were living upstairs, Mr. Williams. And they did it with professional crews. You cannot install this with 2 guys and a pickup truck. This took cranes. This took welding equipment." I felt dizzy. 5 years ago, I was traveling a lot, consulting on the bridge project in Dubai. I was gone for weeks at a time. Eleanor had said she was doing renovations. She said she was fixing the foundation, waterproofing the basement. She was building a vault. And then Frank reached into his pocket. "I found this," he said. It was taped to the frame, right at eye level. He handed me a small rectangular object. It was a piece of mica, transparent and heavy. It had been laser etched. The edges were smooth and polished. I held it up to the light. The letters were precise, sharp, and undeniable. "For Maya, when you are strong enough to know the truth." My hand shook. The plaque slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor. For Maya, not for me, not for Vivian. For the daughter I had called a failure, for the daughter I had dismissed as weak. Why, I whispered. Why her before Frank could answer? I heard the front door open upstairs. Dad Maya's voice drifted down, tentative and scared. "We are down here," I yelled back, my voice sounding harsh even to my own ears. A moment later, footsteps descended the stairs. Maya appeared. She was wearing her diner uniform, a hideous orange and brown polyester dress that fit her poorly. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and strands of it stuck to her forehead with sweat. She smelled of old fryer oil and stale coffee. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes dark with fatigue. She looked like a woman who had been beaten down by life every single day for the last 10 years. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom, seeing Frank, seeing the demolished wall, seeing the massive steel face of the vault. Her eyes went wide. She put a hand to her mouth. "What is this?" she whispered. I picked up the mica plaque from the floor and held it out to her. "Your mother left this," I said. "For you." Maya stepped down onto the concrete floor. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the plaque. She read the inscription. Her lips moved silently, forming the words, "When you are strong enough." "I do not understand," she said, looking at me, her eyes filling with tears. "What is in there, Dad?" "I do not know," I said. "But whatever it is, she wanted you to see it. Not me. You." I turned back to the door. "Frank," I said, "open it." Frank looked at me, then at Maya. "Sir," he said, "the keypad is dead." "But I found the override." He pointed to a small panel near the floor. "It is a manual release," he said, "but it requires two people. One to hold the tension lever, one to turn the gear. It is a fail-safe." I nodded. "Do it." Frank knelt by the panel. He inserted a heavy pry bar into the tension slot. I grabbed the wheel mechanism he indicated. On three, he grunted. 1, 2, 3. He pushed down on the bar. I turned the wheel. It resisted grinding against years of disuse. Metal screeched against metal, a sound like a dying animal screaming. "Keep turning," Frank shouted. I put my shoulder into it. I channeled 40 years of rage, 40 years of confusion into that motion. The wheel turned. There was a loud thunk as the hydraulic pins retracted. The steel door groaned. It popped open just an inch, releasing a hiss of pressurized air. The smell that escaped was not the smell of stale air. It was the smell of ozone, the smell of hot servers, the smell of electricity. I stepped back, breathing hard. "Open it," I said to Maya. "Me," she asked, clutching the plaque to her chest. "It has your name on it," I said. "Open the damn door." Maya handed the plaque to Frank. She stepped forward. Her hands were red and chapped from washing dishes. Her fingernails were short and uneven. She looked so small, standing next to that massive steel slab. She placed her hand on the handle. She pulled. The door was heavy, but balanced perfectly on its hinges. It swung open smoothly, revealing the darkness inside. Frank shone his flashlight into the breach. "God Almighty," Frank whispered. I moved up beside Maya. We looked inside. It was not just a room. It was a command center. Banks of hard drives hummed with backup power. A wall of monitors stood dark and waiting. And in the center of the room, sitting on a glass desk that looked entirely out of place in this industrial bunker, was a single, sealed envelope. Maya made a sound in her throat, a choked sob. She stepped over the threshold. As she did, motion sensors triggered. Lights flickered on overhead. Not the harsh fluorescence of the basement, but soft, focused track lighting. The room was revealed in high definition, and what I saw on the walls made my knees buckle. They were covered in maps. Maps of Chicago. Maps of zoning districts. Maps of sewer lines and electrical grids. And pinned over every map were photographs. Photographs of Vivian. Vivian shaking hands with the mayor. Vivian cutting ribbons at construction sites. Vivian dining with known mob associates. And connected to every photo of Vivian was a red string leading to a single point on the central map. The Millennium Tower. The project my eldest daughter was currently building. The tallest residential building in the Midwest. The jewel in her crown. And underneath the photo of the tower, Eleanor had written one word in red marker. Coffin. I felt the room spin. I reached out to steady myself against the doorframe. The cold steel bit into my palm. Maya walked to the desk. She picked up the envelope. "Dad," she whispered. I looked at her. She was holding the envelope up. It had her name on it. But underneath her name was something else. Maya. The only one with clean hands. I looked at my own hands. They were trembling. I looked at Maya's hands, rough and scarred from hard work. Clean hands. I realized then, with a sickening jolt, that Eleanor had not hidden this from me because she didn't trust me. She had hidden it from me because she knew exactly who I was. She knew I would have chosen Vivian. She knew I would have chosen the success, the prestige, the lie. She had left it for Maya because Maya had nothing left to lose. "Open it," I said, my voice raspy. Maya tore open the envelope. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "It is a login code," she said, "for the computer." She sat down in the ergonomic chair that had been her mother's. She typed in the code. The wall of monitors blazed to life, and the first image that appeared on the central screen was a video file. It was dated 3 days before Eleanor died. In the video, my wife was sitting in this very chair. She looked pale, sick, but her eyes were fierce. If you are watching this video, Eleanor said, it means I am dead. And it means Joseph finally stopped looking at his skyscrapers long enough to look at his family. Her eyes on the screen seemed to bore straight into mine. Joseph, she said, you are a brilliant engineer. But you are a terrible father. You worship the structure, but you ignore the rot. Vivian is a monster, Joseph. And you created her. The video cut to black. I stood there in the silence, the hum of the servers filling my ears. Maya turned to look at me. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. For the first time in years, she did not look like a failure. She looked like the only person in the room who was standing on solid ground. "What do we do, Dad?" she asked. I looked at the screens. I looked at the maps. I looked at the evidence of a lifetime of lies. "We lock the door," I said, "and we get to work." We stepped fully into the room, and the air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was a small space, roughly 15 square meters, carved out of the earth like a tumor growing on the side of my house. The silence here was different from the silence upstairs. Upstairs was the silence of absence. Here was the silence of calculation. The only sound was the low, rhythmic hum of the server towers stacked in the corner, their blue status lights blinking in the semi-darkness like the eyes of deep-sea fish. Frank stood by the door, his hands still gripping the pry bar. He looked terrified. He was a man who understood physical danger, falling beams, live wires, collapsing trenches. But this was a different kind of danger. This was the danger of secrets that could get you killed. I looked around the walls. Eleanor had lined them with corkboard, and every square inch was covered. It looked like the inside of a detective's mind. There were maps of Chicago zoning districts, overlaid with transparent sheets, marked in red grease pencil. There were flowcharts that looked like tangled roots, tracing money from shell companies in the Cayman Islands to construction firms in Illinois. And there were photographs, hundreds of them. I walked closer to the wall, my legs feeling heavy and numb. The photos were taken from a distance, grainy, and zoomed in. There was Vivian leaving a steakhouse with a man I recognized as a city councilman who had been indicted for bribery last year. There was Vivian handing a thick envelope to a man in a hard hat at a construction site I did not recognize. There was Vivian arguing with a concrete supplier, her face twisted in a snarl I had never seen before. In every picture, she looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She did not look like the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle. She did not look like the woman who brought me expensive scotch on my birthday. Maya was standing by the desk, trembling. She had not looked at the walls yet. Her eyes were fixed on the glass surface of the desk, where a single, handwritten letter lay next to a ruggedized military-grade laptop. "Read it, Dad," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the servers. I picked up the letter. The paper was heavy, expensive stationery, the kind Eleanor used for her most important correspondence. Her handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, loop-filled script that had become shakier towards the end of her life. I sat down in her chair. The leather was still molded to the shape of her body. I felt a wave of nausea. I was invading her sanctuary. I was reading her last will and testament, not of property, but of pain. "My dearest Joseph," the letter began. "If you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means you finally opened your eyes. I prayed every day that you never would. I prayed that I could fix this before I died, so you could keep your illusions. You always loved your illusions, Joseph. You loved your perfect skyscrapers and your perfect daughter. You never wanted to see the cracks." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. "I have been living in terror for 5 years, Joseph. 5 years of watching our daughter turn into something I do not recognize. You see a successful businesswoman. I see a criminal. Vivian is not just cutting corners. She is washing blood money. She is building tombs." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Blood money, tombs. These were words that did not belong in our life. We were respectable people. We paid our taxes. We went to church on Sundays. I did not tell you because I knew you would not believe me, the letter continued. You would have gone to her. You would have asked her for the truth, and she would have lied to you with that beautiful smile of hers. And then she would have hurt you. Or worse, she would have used you. Vivian is running a network of shell companies. She buys cheap, condemned land and secures loans for luxury developments that never get finished or are built with materials that should be illegal. She uses the construction budgets to launder money for the cartel she works with. Yes, Joseph. Cartel. The Azure Syndicate. I felt the blood drain from my face. The Azure Syndicate. I had read about them in the papers. They were responsible for half the drug traffic in Chicago. My daughter, my Vivian, working with them. It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. Eleanor had a stroke. Her mind must have been going long before she died. Paranoia. Dementia. That had to be it. But then I turned the page. But that is not the worst of it, Joseph. The worst is what she did to Maya. I looked up at Maya. She was hugging herself, rocking slightly on her heels. She was looking at the wall, now staring at a flowchart that linked a company called Phoenix Holdings to a bank account in Panama. Vivian needed a scapegoat, Eleanor wrote. She needed a clean name to put on the riskiest documents. She needed someone with no assets, someone nobody would look at twice. She stole Maya's identity, Joseph. She stole her social security number. She forged her signature. She made Maya the legal owner of 3 shell companies that are currently under investigation by the IRS and the FBI, Phoenix Holdings, JMW Construction, North Star Supply. All of them are in Maya's name. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the desk, landing on top of the laptop. No, I whispered. No. Maya turned to me. Her face was ashen. She looked like she had been struck physically. Phoenix Holdings, she said, her voice hollow. I looked at her. Do you know that name? Maya let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Dad, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. 3 years ago, I applied for a car loan. Just a used Toyota. The bank laughed at me. They said I had $4 million in outstanding business loans. I thought it was a clerical error. I spent months on the phone trying to fix it. They told me I was crazy. She walked over to the desk and grabbed a stack of papers from a tray. She flipped through them frantically. And the tax audit, she said, her voice rising in hysteria. Last year, the IRS froze my checking account. They took every cent I had saved for Leo's tuition. They said I owed $200,000 in back taxes for a business I never heard of. I told you, Dad. I told you I was being audited, and you told me I was irresponsible. You told me to stop whining and pay my bills, I remembered. God help me, I remembered. It was a Tuesday. I was watching a football game. She had called crying, talking about the IRS and frozen accounts. I had muted the TV and sighed. Maya, I had said, if you do not file your taxes correctly, that is your problem. Do not bring your drama to me. I had hung up on her. It wasn't me, Maya screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. It was never me. It was her. She took my name. She took my credit. She made me look like a failure so she could be a queen. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. It was a raw, ugly sound. The sound of a woman who realizes her entire life has been a lie orchestrated by her own sister. I sat frozen in the chair. My mind was trying to reject the information. It was trying to build a wall against the truth, just like I built walls against the wind. Vivian gave $1 million to the Children's Hospital last month, I said, my voice sounding weak and pathetic. She is on the board of the Art Institute. She is a good person. Maya looked up at me from the floor. Her eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a hatred I had never seen before. Not hatred for Vivian. Hatred for me. She is a monster, Dad, Maya screamed. Look at the wall. Look at the evidence. Mom knew Mom spent her dying days protecting me from her. And you just polished your trophies and bragged about the daughter who was destroying us. I looked at Frank. He was standing in the corner looking down at his boots. He wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Frank, I said. Is this real? Frank looked up. He pointed a calloused finger at the monitor. Mr. Williams, he said quietly, I am just a builder. I do not know about banks and shell companies, but I know drawings. Look at that screen. I looked at the laptop. The file open on the screen was a blueprint. It was the structural drawing for the Millennium Tower. The header block listed the structural engineer of record. Structural engineer Joseph Williams. I stopped breathing. I never worked on the Millennium Tower. I had retired from active design 5 years ago. I only did consulting now. I leaned closer to the screen. My seal was there. My signature was there. She forged my signature too. She had not just used Maya. She had used me. She had put my name on her building, my reputation, my 40 years of unblemished work. She had stamped it onto her tombstone. If that building falls down, Frank said softly, you go to jail, Mr. Williams. Not her. You. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk. It cannot be true, I muttered. There must be an explanation. Maybe she was trying to honor me. Maybe she wanted my name on it as a tribute. A tribute, Maya spat, standing up. She wiped her face with the back of her greasy hand. You are pathetic, Dad. Even now, with the knife in your back, you are trying to make excuses for her. She is my daughter, I said, standing up, my voice rising. And so are you. I cannot just believe that she is evil. I cannot believe she would do this to us. Then why is this room here? Maya yelled, gesturing wildly at the maps. Why did Mom build a vault? Why did she die terrified? I looked at the letter again. The last paragraph caught my eye. I know you are struggling to believe this, Joseph. I know you think I am crazy. But trust the numbers. You always trust the numbers. Go to the site. Go to the Millennium Tower. Check the concrete. Check the steel. The invoices say she ordered grade 60 rebar, but the shipping manifests in the crate under the desk show she bought grade 40 scrap from a breaker yard in China. She is building a 70-story tower out of garbage, Joseph, and she put your name on the foundation. I looked under the desk. There was a gray plastic crate. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I opened the lid. Inside were hundreds of shipping manifests, customs declarations, trucking logs. I pulled out a random sheet. It was a bill of lading for 400 tons of steel reinforcement bars. Destination Millennium Tower job site. Origin Shenzhen recycling scrap. Description: non-structural metal scrap. My hands went cold. Non-structural scrap. They were putting scrap metal into the columns of a skyscraper. I looked at the date on the manifest. 2 months ago. The building was already up to the 50th floor. If this was true, the building was not just a fraud. It was a bomb. A gravity bomb waiting for a strong wind to detonate it. But still, a part of me refused to let go. Vivian was my golden girl. She was the one who listened to my stories about engineering when Maya was drawing pictures in the corner. She was the one who wanted to be like me. These could be faked, I said, staring at the paper. Anyone can print a manifest. Anyone can Photoshop a signature. Maya stared at me in disbelief. She looked at Frank. He is not going to do anything she said to the builder. He is going to let her get away with it. He is going to let me go to jail for her crimes. No, I said sharply. No, Maya. But I need proof. Real proof. Not papers in a basement. I need to see it. See what Maya asked. The building, I said. I am going to the site. I am going to test the concrete myself. If she is innocent, the concrete will prove it. If she is guilty. I let the sentence hang in the air. Frank stepped forward. Mr. Williams, you cannot just walk onto that site. It is a union job. It is secured. And if your daughter is who your wife says she is, it is dangerous. I am the engineer of record, I said, pointing at the screen, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. According to these lies, it is my building. Nobody stops the engineer from inspecting his own foundation. I turned to Maya. Stay here, I said. Lock the door from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me." "You are going alone?" she asked, her voice small again. "I have to," I said. "I have to look her in the eye. Or rather, I have to look her creation in the eye." I grabbed my coat. I felt a weight in my pocket. It was my Schmidt hammer, a device used for non-destructive testing of concrete hardness. I always carried it in my car. It was an old habit. Today, it would be my weapon. I walked out of the room, leaving the hum of the servers and the sobbing of my daughter behind me. I climbed the stairs to the main house. The hallway was dark. The shadows seemed to stretch out like grasping hands. I was going to find the truth. But deep down in the pit of my stomach, I knew that Eleanor was right. I knew that what I would find would destroy me. I just hoped it would not kill me first. Frank stood awkwardly by the heavy steel door, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The revelation of the room had stripped away the barrier between employer and employee, leaving us as three terrified people staring into an abyss. But I knew I could not keep him here. This was a family hemorrhage, and while Frank was a good man, he was a civilian in a war he did not understand. "Frank," I said, turning away from the glowing screens to face him, "I need you to go home." He looked at me, then at Maya, who was still slumped in the chair, her face a mask of shock. "Mr. Williams," he stammered, "I cannot just leave you two here. This looks like police business." "No police," I said sharply. "Not yet. If we call them now without understanding the full scope of this, my daughter goes to jail." "Look at the walls, Frank. Everything points to Maya. We need time to untangle the knot before we hand it over to the law." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my checkbook. I knew Frank lived paycheck to paycheck. I knew he had a wife with arthritis and a son in community college. Money was the only language that could buy silence in a situation like this. I wrote a check for $10,000. It was an impulsive amount, but fear makes you generous. "Take this," I said, tearing the slip of paper from the book. "This is for the demolition work, and for your discretion. I need you to forget you ever saw this room. Forget the door. Forget the maps. Come back in 3 days to finish the drywall upstairs, but until then, you saw nothing." Frank took the check. His eyes widened slightly at the number, but he did not smile. He understood the gravity of the bribe. "I will keep my mouth shut, Mr. Williams," he said quietly. "But please, take care of the girl. She looks like she is about to break." He nodded once to Maya, gathered his tools, and left. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing upstairs before I exhaled. Now it was just us, the engineer and the scapegoat. I locked the steel door from the inside, engaging the hydraulic pins. Then I turned back to the desk. I needed to stop being a father for a moment. I needed to be what I was trained to be, a structural engineer, a forensic analyst of failure. "Get up, Maya," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Pull up a chair. We are going to go through every single file on this drive." Maya wiped her eyes and dragged a stool over to the desk. She looked like a child expecting a scolding, shrinking away from me. It broke my heart, but I pushed the feeling down. I needed cold logic. I sat at the ruggedized laptop and began to dig. Eleanor had been thorough. She had organized the files not by date, but by material: concrete, glass, electrical, and finally steel. I clicked on the folder labeled Structural Steel Imports. Inside were hundreds of PDF files, invoices, bills of lading, heat analysis reports from foundries. I opened a file dated 6 months ago. It was an invoice from a supplier in Southeast Asia for 2,000 tons of reinforcement bars. The invoice listed the product as Grade 40 Carbon Steel, CT3. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement temperature. CT3 is a Russian standard equivalent to mild steel. It is soft. It has a low yield strength. It is perfectly fine for making window frames or garden fences. It is absolutely forbidden for use in the primary load-bearing columns of a high-rise building. I opened the next file. It was a receiving document from the Millennium Tower job site. It listed the same shipment, the same weight, the same shipping container numbers. But the description had changed. High tensile deformed bar, SD-490. I stared at the screen. SD-490 is the gold standard for skyscrapers. It is chemically treated to withstand massive tension. It is designed to bend before it breaks, giving a building the ductility it needs to survive high winds or earthquakes. Vivian was buying fence posts and labeling them as skyscraper bones. She is swapping the tags, I whispered, pointing at the screen. She is buying the cheapest, weakest steel on the market for pennies on the dollar and billing the investors for premium materials. The difference in cost. I did a quick mental calculation. 2,000 tons. The price spread between mild steel and high tensile steel was roughly $400 per ton. That was $800,000 in profit on a single shipment, and a building of that size would need 20 shipments. $16 million, I said aloud. She is stealing $16 million just on the steel budget. But who signed for it? I scrolled down to the bottom of the receiving document. There was a signature line for the quality assurance officer. The signature was loops and sharp angles, written in blue ink. Maya Williams. I looked at the signature. Then I looked at Maya. "Is this you?" I asked, tapping the screen. Maya leaned in, squinting. She shook her head violently. "No, I mean, it looks like my signature. It looks exactly like how I sign my checks. But I never signed that. I have never been to a construction site in my life, Dad. You know that." I zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the stroke weight was uniform. Too uniform. "It is a stamp," I said, analyzing the pressure points of the ink. "Or a digital auto pen. She lifted your signature from a birthday card or a tax document and turned it into a rubber stamp. She has been stamping your death warrant on every beam in that building." "Why?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Why would she do this? She is rich, Dad. She makes a huge salary. Why risk prison? Why risk killing people for money she does not even need?" That was the question. Vivian was ambitious. Yes. But she was not stupid. This was not just greed. This was desperation. You do not commit fraud on this scale unless you have a gun to your head. I went back to the file directory. Eleanor had a folder named Follow the Money. I opened it. It was a spreadsheet dense with numbers and dates. It tracked the outflow of cash from the construction budget. The $16 million from the steel fraud did not go into Vivian's bank account. It went into a series of shell companies. Blue Horizon Trading, Vance Security, North Star Logistics. And from there, the money vanished into the ether. Crypto wallets. I clicked on a subfolder labeled The Why. Inside was a dossier on Vivian's personal finances. It was an autopsy of a gambler. 3 years ago, Vivian had leveraged her entire portfolio to invest in a new cryptocurrency exchange. She had borrowed against her house, her stock options, everything. She put in $5 million. 2 weeks later, the exchange collapsed. It was a rug pull. She lost everything. But she didn't just lose her own money. The dossier showed she had borrowed another $10 million from a private equity firm called Vance Solutions. I Googled Vance Solutions. Nothing. No website. No LinkedIn. But Eleanor had notes. Vance Solutions is a front for the Azure Syndicate. Loan sharks. They charge 20% interest a month. Vivian is not stealing to get rich. She is stealing to stay alive. I sat back, the leather chair creaking under my weight. The picture was complete. Vivian was drowning. She had borrowed money from cartels to cover a gambling loss, and when she couldn't pay, they forced her to turn her construction sites into laundromats. They forced her to buy cheap steel from their suppliers and pay premium prices to wash their drug money. And she needed a fall guy. She couldn't go to prison. She was the golden child. She was the face of the company. So she looked at her little sister, the waitress, the single mother, the failure. I looked at Maya. She was staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on her uniform. "She used you because you were invisible," I said quietly. "She knew that if things went wrong, If the building collapsed or the IRS came looking, they would find your name on everything. She would play the grieving sister shocked that her sibling was a criminal mastermind. And because you have no money, no lawyers, and a history of financial struggle, everyone would believe it, including me. Especially me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I remembered the conversations over Sunday dinner. Vivian would sip her wine and sigh. "Dad, I am worried about Maya. She asked me for $5,000 again. I think she is using drugs. I saw needle marks on her arm. I had believed her. I had never checked. I had never asked Maya. I just assumed that the successful daughter was telling the truth, and the struggling daughter was the problem." Vivian had been planting seeds of doubt in my mind for years. She was inoculating me against the truth. She was making sure that if Maya ever came to me for help, I would see it as a manipulation. I turned to Maya. "Do you have your phone?" I asked. She nodded and pulled a cracked iPhone from her apron pocket. "Unlock it," I said. "Show me the messages." She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Dad, they are bad. Show me." She unlocked it and handed it to me. I scrolled to the text messages. There were dozens of them from block numbers. Date, October 12th. "Payment is late, Maya. We know Leo waits for the bus at the corner of Elm and Oak. Cute kid. Would be a shame if he missed the bus. Date, November 1st. Tell your partner the concrete pour needs to happen by Friday. If we don't get our clean cash, we take a finger from the boy. Date, December 5th. You think you can hide? We own your debt. We own your name. Keep signing the papers or we send the photos to your father." I dropped the phone on the desk. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. "They think you are the partner," I whispered. "Vivian told them you are the one running the scheme. She told the cartel that you are the one holding up the money. She put a target on your back to keep it off hers." Maya began to cry again, silent, heaving sobs. "I have been so scared, Dad," she choked out. "I get these texts and I do not know what they mean. I moved 3 times in the last year. I changed Leo's school. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I did something wrong and I just forgot. I thought maybe I deserved it. You thought you deserved it because I taught you to think that I said." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. For the first time in decades, I didn't see the stained uniform or the tired eyes. I saw a woman who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, while I sat in my ivory tower judging her. I stood up and walked over to her. I felt stiff, old, and incredibly heavy. I knelt down. My knees cracked on the concrete floor. I took her rough hands in mine. "Maya," I said, "look at me." She raised her tear-stained face. "I am sorry," I said. And I knew, as I said it, that the words were not enough. "I am so sorry. I left you alone in the dark. I let her do this to you." "It wasn't your fault, Dad," she whispered. "You didn't know." "It was my fault," I said fiercely. It is the job of an engineer to check the foundation. It is the job of a father to protect his children. I failed at both. I saw what I wanted to see. I wanted a successful daughter so badly that I let her become a monster. And I wanted to be right about you being a failure so I wouldn't have to feel guilty about not helping you. I squeezed her hands. But that ends today. Right now. I stood up, pulling her up with me. The despair in the room was being replaced by something else. A cold, hard resolve. It was the feeling I got when I walked onto a job site and saw a wall that was out of plumb. You don't cry about the wall. You don't wish the wall was straight. You tear it down and you build it right. We are going to fix this, I said. Not with lawyers, not with police, not yet. We are going to use the one thing Vivian respects, physics. I turned back to the screen, to the fraudulent steel invoices. She thinks she is untouchable because she has money and connections, I said. But she made a mistake. A fatal mistake. She compromised the structure. She thinks numbers on a spreadsheet are all that matter. But gravity doesn't care about money. Gravity doesn't care about the cartel. Gravity only cares about the truth. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, wiping her face with her sleeve. "We are going to do what I should have done 5 years ago," I said. "We are going to inspect the work." I looked at the time on the computer screen. It was 4 in the afternoon. The site would be shutting down for the day. The shadows would be long, perfect for finding cracks. "I am going to test that concrete," I said. "And if the steel inside is what this paper says it is, then God help us all. Because that building is not just a crime scene. It is a mass grave waiting to happen." I left Maya in the bunker. I told her to lock the bolts and not to open them unless I texted her a specific code word. She looked small and terrified, sitting in her mother's chair, surrounded by the blue glow of the server lights, but she nodded. She understood the stakes now. We were not just fighting a family dispute. We were fighting a criminal enterprise that had already threatened to hurt her son. I drove back into the city. The sky had turned a bruised purple over Lake Michigan, reflecting the coming night. I navigated the familiar grid of Chicago streets, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel of my Mercedes. I had driven these roads for 40 years, building the skyline that now loomed over me. Every tower was a testament to gravity and the math used to defeat it. But as I approached the Millennium Tower site, I felt a sickness in my stomach that had nothing to do with traffic. The site was massive. It occupied a prime city block on the riverfront. The superstructure was already rising, piercing the clouds, a skeleton of steel and concrete that would eventually house 500 luxury apartments. To the untrained eye, it looked impressive. To me, it looked like a crime scene. I pulled up to the VIP gate. The security guard, a young man in a heavy coat, stepped out of his booth, holding up a hand. "Site is closed, sir," he said. "No visitors after 4. I rolled down my window. I did not yell. I did not plead. I simply looked at him with the expression I had worn for decades on job sites across the world. The look of the man who signs the checks. "Do you know who I am, son?" I asked quietly. He squinted at me, then at the car. He hesitated. "I am Joseph Williams," I said. "My name is on the permit board behind you. I am the engineer of record for this project, and I am here to do a spot inspection on the B3 columns before the morning pour. Open the gate." He looked at the board. He saw the name. Joseph Williams, lead structural engineer. He didn't know the signature was forged. He didn't know I had been retired for 5 years. He just saw an old white man in an expensive car speaking with absolute authority. He opened the gate. I drove through, parking near the construction trailers. The site was mostly deserted, the day crew gone, and the night shift not yet fully deployed. The wind whipped through the steel girders, making them sing a low, mournful note. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat. Inside was my Schmidt hammer, also known as a Swiss hammer. It is a simple mechanical device used for non-destructive testing of concrete hardness. It looks like a thick metal baton. You press it against the concrete, a spring-loaded mass strikes the surface, and the rebound distance gives you an R value. That value tells you the compressive strength of the material. It does not lie. I put on my hard hat and safety vest, which I kept in the trunk. I walked past the silent cranes and the stacks of rebar. I headed for the hoist that led down to the parking levels. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The air smelled of wet cement dust and diesel fumes. I reached the lowest level, basement 3. This was the critical zone. The columns here carried the weight of the entire 50-story tower above. If these failed, the building would not just crack. It would pancake. It would collapse into its own footprint, killing everyone inside. I walked up to the main load-bearing column C14. It was a massive rectangle of gray concrete, 5 feet thick. It looked solid, but looks mean nothing in engineering. I took out the Schmidt hammer. I calibrated the dial. I pressed the plunger against the surface of the column. Thwack. The sound was dull. A hollow thud, rather than the sharp ring of high-density concrete. I looked at the scale. The needle hovered at 28. My heart skipped a beat. For a building of this height, the design specifications required concrete with a compressive strength of 8,000 psi on a Schmidt hammer that should give a reading of at least 45 or 50. 28 meant the concrete was barely 4,000 psi. It was half the required strength. I moved to another spot. Thwack, 30. I moved to the next column. Thwack, 25. I felt like I was going to vomit. This was not concrete. This was hardened mud. It was barely strong enough for a sidewalk, let alone a skyscraper. I put the hammer away and took out a flashlight. I shone the beam along the surface of the column near the ceiling where the stress was highest. And there they were, micro cracks. They were hairline fractures barely visible to the naked eye, spider webbing across the surface. We call it crazing. It happens when the concrete mix has too much water or too much sand and not enough cement. It is a sign of a lean mix, a cheap mix. Vivian was not just using cheap steel. She was diluting the concrete. She was cutting the cement content probably by 30 or 40% to save money on every truckload. I reached out and picked at the edge of a crack with my fingernail. A chunk of concrete the size of a quarter crumbled off. It felt sandy in my hand, gritty. There was no cohesion. I stared at the gray dust on my fingertips. This was murder. Premeditated murder. When the building reached full height, or when the first heavy winter storm hit, the lateral wind loads would put tension on these columns. The cheap steel inside would stretch because it was too soft. The weak concrete outside would crush because it was too sandy. The columns would explode. The tower would come down in seconds. I took a plastic sample bag from my pocket and scraped the loose concrete into it. I needed physical evidence for the lab. "Hey, who is down here?" The voice boomed through the cavernous basement, echoing off the concrete walls. I froze. I shoved the bag into my pocket and turned around. A man was walking toward me out of the shadows. He was wearing a white hard hat and a high-visibility jacket that looked too clean. He was big, with the thick neck of a bouncer, and eyes that looked like flint. I recognized him from the photos in Eleanor's bunker. This was not a foreman. This was Marcus Henderson, the site director. And according to Eleanor's notes, he was Vivian's handler from the syndicate. He stopped 10 feet away from me. His hand drifted instinctively to his belt, though I could not see a weapon. "Mr. Williams," he said slowly. He knew me. Of course he knew me. My face was on the company website. My forged signature was on his paychecks. "Mr. Henderson," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It has been a long time." He narrowed his eyes. "I did not know you were scheduled for a site visit. We usually get a heads up from the office, or from Vivian." I forced a smile. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to smile at the man who was helping my daughter build a mass grave. "I was in the neighborhood," I said, tapping my hard hat. "Old habits die hard, Marcus. I was having dinner downtown and I just couldn't resist stopping by to see the girl's progress. She tells me you are ahead of schedule." Henderson did not smile back. He looked at the Schmidt hammer sticking out of my bag. "Is that a test hammer?" he asked. I patted the bag. "Just a prop. I like to keep my hand in. Checked a few columns just for fun." And he asked, his voice dropping an octave. "What did you find?" The air in the basement felt suddenly very thin. This was the moment. If I told him the truth, he would never let me leave this hole. A construction accident is easy to arrange in a place like this. A fall down a shaft, a loose pallet of bricks. I looked him right in the eye and lied with the smoothness of a politician. "Solid as a rock," I said. "You guys are running a tight ship. The rebound numbers are off the charts. I am going to tell Vivian she is wasting money on overspec concrete." Henderson stared at me for a long 5 seconds. He was looking for the sweat on my brow. He was looking for the tremor in my hands. But I was frozen in fear, and that fear held me rigid. Finally, he relaxed his shoulders slightly. "We aim to please, Mr. Williams," he said. "But next time, give us a call. Security is tight. We have had some theft issues. Of course, I said, stepping past him toward the hoist. I didn't mean to spook you. I am just a proud father wanting to see his daughter's legacy. I walked to the elevator. I could feel his eyes boring into my back. I pressed the button. The longest 10 seconds of my life passed while I waited for the cage to arrive. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and hit the ground floor button. As the door slid shut, I saw Henderson pull his phone from his pocket. He was not looking at me anymore. He was dialing. I knew exactly who he was calling. The ride-up was agonizing. When I reached the ground level, I walked quickly to my car. I did not run. Running looks guilty. I walked with purpose. I got in the Mercedes and started the engine. As I pulled away from the gate, I looked in the rearview mirror. Henderson was standing outside the construction trailer watching me leave. The phone was still pressed to his ear. I merged onto the highway and gunned the engine. My hands were shaking so bad now that the car swerved slightly in the lane. She knows. Henderson had called Vivian. He had told her I was there. He had told her I was testing the concrete. Vivian is smart. She knows I am an engineer. She knows I would never compliment a column that registered a 28. She knows that solid as a rock was a lie. She knows that I know. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it. Incoming call, Vivian. I stared at the screen. The face of my beautiful, successful daughter smiled up at me. It was a photo I had taken at her graduation. She looked so innocent then. I did not answer. The phone stopped ringing, then started again immediately. She was panicking. Good. But panic makes people dangerous. I needed to get back to Maya. We were exposed. The timeline had just accelerated from days to hours. We didn't have time to be careful anymore. We had to go on the offensive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the plastic bag with the concrete crumbs. It was not much, but it was enough to start a war. I dialed the one number Eleanor had left in her emergency contacts list. The number for Captain Marcus at the Economic Crimes Unit. It went to voicemail. Captain Marcus, I said, my voice tight. This is Joseph Williams, Eleanor's husband. I have the proof. I have the samples. But you need to move fast. The Millennium Tower is going to fall down, and my daughter is the one holding the detonator. I hung up and floored the accelerator. The city lights blurred past me, a streak of gold and red. I was driving back to the bunker, back to the only truth left in my life. I just prayed I wasn't leading the wolves right to the door. I pulled into my driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires of my Mercedes like the sound of breaking bones. The house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the living room window. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not left that light on. I killed the engine and sat for a moment in the silence of the car. My hands were still shaking from the encounter at the construction site. I gripped the steering wheel, taking deep breaths, trying to force the adrenaline back down. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the Joseph Williams everyone expected, the retired engineer, the grieving widower, the slightly out-of-touch old man. I checked my phone. No new messages from Maya. She was still in the bunker. Safe, for now. I got out of the car and walked up the front steps. I unlocked the door, my movements deliberate and slow. I stepped into the foyer. Dad. The voice came from the living room. It was smooth, melodic, and terrifyingly familiar. Vivian. She was sitting on the sofa, legs crossed, a glass of my best scotch in her hand. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than Maya's car, and her hair was styled in perfect glossy waves. On the coffee table in front of her sat a large gift box wrapped in silver paper. Vivian, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a rictus on my face. I didn't know you were coming by. She stood up and walked over to me, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and cold air. Her body felt stiff against mine. I tried calling you, she said, pulling back to look at me. Her eyes were searching, scanning my face for any sign of deception. You didn't answer. I got worried. I was driving, I said, hanging my coat on the rack. My phone was on silent. You know how I am with technology. I heard you were downtown, she said, casually returning to the sofa and picking up her drink. Marcus called me. He said you stopped by the Millennium Tower site. Here it was, the test. I walked over to the armchair opposite her and sat down, letting out a heavy sigh, like an old man settling in for the evening. Ah, yes, I said, rubbing my knees. I had a meeting near the river. I saw the cranes and, well, I just couldn't help myself. I wanted to see my girl's masterpiece. Marcus said you were testing the concrete, Vivian said. Her voice was light conversational, but her eyes were like lasers. With your old Schmidt hammer, I chuckled, a dry, dusty sound. Old habits, Viv. I see a column, I want to hit it. Just wanted to see if they are still pouring them like we used to. And, she asked. She took a sip of scotch, watching me over the rim of the glass. What did you think? Impressive, I lied. Very solid. You are building a good ship there, honey. Your mother would have been proud. At the mention of her mother, a flicker of something passed across Vivian's face. Annoyance, guilt. It was gone too fast to be sure. I am glad you think so, she said. We are under a lot of pressure. The investors are breathing down my neck. She gestured to the silver box on the table. I brought you a gift, she said. It is that vintage telescope you wanted, for the library. I thought it might cheer you up. You have seemed distant lately. That is very thoughtful of you, I said. But you didn't have to come all this way just for that. I am your daughter, Dad. I worry about you, living alone in this big old house. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the hallway that led to the basement door. Have you been down there lately to Mom's office? My stomach tightened. A little, I said. Just clearing out some old boxes. Why? No reason, she said, looking back at me. Her fingers began to tap on the side of her glass. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous tick I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, lying about her homework. I was just thinking, maybe we should hire a professional crew to clean it out. Get rid of all that old junk. You shouldn't be down there breathing in that dust. I have Frank handling it, I said. He is doing a fine job. Frank, her eyes narrowed. The old Polish guy, is he reliable? You know how these contractors are, they snoop. He just knocks down walls, Vivian. He doesn't read papers. Good, she said sharply. Then she softened her tone, flashing that dazzling smile that could charm investors out of millions. I just want you to be safe, Dad. Speaking of safe, have you heard from Maya? I shook my head. Not in a few weeks. Why? Vivian sighed, putting on a mask of sisterly concern. I heard some disturbing things. A friend of mine in the police department. He says her name came up in an investigation. Loan sharks, Dad. Gambling debts. I watched her perform. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was painting Maya as the villain, preemptively destroying her credibility, so that if Maya ever spoke up, I would dismiss it as the ravings of an addict. She is in trouble again, I asked, feigning disappointment. Worse than that, Vivian said, leaning forward. They say she is desperate. She might try to come to you for money, or she might try to steal from you. Steal from me. Addicts do crazy things, Vivian said. If she comes here, Dad, do not let her in. Do not give her cash. And for God's sake, check your accounts. She knows your passwords, doesn't she? I looked at my daughter. The light from the lamp cast shadows across her face, making her look skeletal. I saw the coldness in her eyes. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. She was terrified that Maya would find the truth, so she was trying to cut Maya off from the only ally she had left. Me. I will be careful, I said. Thank you for warning me. Vivian stood up. She walked over to the mantelpiece where a photo of Eleanor stood. She picked it up, running her thumb over the glass. "Mom was so secretive at the end," she murmured. "Did she ever say anything to you about work about me?" "She was sick, Vivian," I said. "She talked about the past, about her garden. She didn't talk about business." Vivian placed the photo back down a little too hard. "Right," she said. "Well, I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." She walked to the door. I followed her. As she buttoned her coat, her eyes darted one last time toward the basement door. It was a hungry, desperate look. She knew something was down there. She just didn't know if I had found it. "Good night, Dad," she said, kissing my cheek. Her lips were cold. "Take care of yourself and remember what I said about Maya. Do not trust her." "Good night, Vivian," I said. I watched her walk to her Porsche. She didn't look back. As soon as her taillights disappeared around the curve of the driveway, I locked the door and bolted it. I leaned against the wood, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 minutes. She suspected. She didn't know for sure, but she suspected. And that meant we were running out of time. I went into the library and opened my laptop. Not the military one from the bunker, but my personal one. I needed to check something. Eleanor had installed a security system years ago. She said it was for burglars. I now knew it was for family. I logged into the cloud server using the password Eleanor had given me before she died. Bluebird. I pulled up the archived footage. I searched for dates when I was out of town. There it was, 2 weeks after Eleanor's funeral. I was in Florida visiting my brother. The camera in the hallway showed Vivian entering the house. She wasn't visiting. She was hunting. She moved through the rooms with a flashlight. She opened drawers. She pulled books off shelves. She spent an hour trying to pry open the basement door which I had locked. She kicked it in frustration. I fast-forwarded. Another date. 3 months ago. Vivian again. This time, she had a man with her. Marcus Henderson. They were standing in the kitchen. I turned up the volume. "Gotta be here," Vivian was saying. She kept files on everything. "If the feds find them, we are dead." "Maybe she destroyed them," Henderson said. "Mom," Vivian laughed a cruel, harsh sound. "Mom never threw away a receipt in her life. She hid them. We just have to find where." I sat back watching my daughter ransack my home. She wasn't just a fraudster. She was a predator, violating the sanctity of her dead mother's house. Then, I saw a file labeled audio, _backup, _February, _2024. February. That was a month before Eleanor died. I clicked play. The screen was black. It was an audio-only recording from the device Eleanor kept in her office. "Please, Vivian," Eleanor's voice filled the room. She sounded weak, breathless. "You have to stop. This is money laundering. You are going to go to prison." "Shut up, Mom," Vivian's voice cut in sharp as a whip. "You don't know what you are talking about. This is finance. This is how the world works." "I know about the steal," Eleanor said. "I saw the invoices. You are building a death trap." "I am building an empire," Vivian shouted. "And you are going to ruin it because you are too old and too scared to understand risk." "I am going to the police," Eleanor said. Her voice was trembling but firm. "I cannot let you hurt people. I am calling Joseph." "Do not bring Dad into this," Vivian hissed. "If you tell Dad, if you tell anyone, I will destroy you, and I won't stop with you." "What are you saying?" "I am saying Maya is fragile," Vivian said. Her voice dropped to a whisper, terrifying in its calmness. "She has a kid. Accidents happen, Mom. People get evicted. People get arrested. If you want your precious loser daughter to stay safe, you will keep your mouth shut. You will take your pills. You will sit in your garden and you will die quietly. Do you understand me?" There was a silence on the tape. Then, the sound of Eleanor weeping. "Get out," Eleanor whispered. "I am leaving," Vivian said. "Remember, Mom, one word to Dad and Maya pays the price." The recording ended. I sat in the silence of my library, tears streaming down my face. She hadn't just died of a stroke. She had died of stress. She had died of terror. Vivian had bullied her own dying mother into silence by holding a gun to her sister's head. My wife had spent her final days in hell protecting me from the truth and protecting Maya from harm. I wiped my face. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I wasn't a father anymore. Not to Vivian. I was an engineer who had found a catastrophic structural failure. And there is only one way to deal with a building that is about to collapse and kill innocent people. You bring it down. Controlled demolition. I stood up and walked to the basement door. I tapped the code on the keypad. I went down the stairs past the demolished wall to the steel door. I knocked the secret knock. The bolts slid back. Maya was sitting at the desk, looking at the screens. She looked up as I entered. "Did you see her?" she asked. "I saw her," I said. And she is exactly who you said she is." I walked over to the map on the wall. I pulled the pin out of the photo of the Millennium Tower. "We are going to bring her down, Maya," I said. "But we have to be smart. She is watching us. She expects us to be weak. She expects me to be old and you to be stupid." I turned to my daughter. "We are going to give her exactly what she expects," I said. "We are going to play the victims until the moment we close the trap." "How?" Maya asked. "Self-preservation," I said. "It is the first rule of engineering. When the load is too heavy, you redistribute it. We are going to shift the weight of her crimes right back onto her shoulders. And we are going to make sure the whole world is watching when she collapses." I reached for the phone. "Who are you calling?" "An old friend," I said. "Captain Marcus is not answering. But I know someone else. Someone who hates bad concrete almost as much as I do." I dialed the number for the city building inspector's office, the private line. "It is time to schedule an inspection," I said. The basement bunker was quiet, save for the hum of the servers. Maya and I sat across from each other at Eleanor's glass desk, the digital map of Vivian's corruption glowing on the screens around us. It was 3 a.m. Neither of us had slept. "We need a plan," I said, breaking the silence. "A structural plan. You do not bring down a building by hitting it with a hammer, Maya. You find the keystones, you weaken the supports, and then you let gravity do the work." Maya looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. The fear was still there, but it was hardening into something else. Resolve. "She has everything, Dad," Maya said. "She has the money, the lawyers, the connections. If we go to the police now, she will spin it. She will say I forged the documents. She will say you are senile. She has been planting that seed for years." "That is why we do not attack her where she is strong," I replied. "We attack her where she is weak. And Vivian's weakness is not her money. It is her arrogance and her greed." I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the desk. "There is a concept in engineering called self-preservation," I said. "It means designing a structure so that if one part fails, the rest can still stand. But when the rot is deep, when the foundation itself is compromised, you cannot patch it. You have to demolish it to save the people inside. We are going to demolish Vivian's lie." "How we are going to give her exactly what she wants," I said. "And then we are going to let it crush her." I picked up my phone. I had missed a call from Captain Marcus earlier. I dialed him back. This time, he picked up on the second ring. "Joseph." His voice was rough with sleep. "It is 3 a.m. Is everything all right?" "No, Marcus," I said. "Nothing is all right. Eleanor was right. About everything." There was a long silence on the line. Marcus had been Eleanor's contact at the Economic Crimes Unit. He was a good man, one of the few who hadn't been bought by the syndicate. Eleanor had helped him with a case years ago, saving his career. He owed us. "The steel?" Marcus asked quietly. "Garbage," I said. "And the concrete is sand. But that is not the worst of it. She is using Maya. She set her up as the fall guy for the whole operation. I was afraid of that, Marcus sighed. We have been tracking the money, Joseph. It all leads to accounts in Maya's name. If we move now, the district attorney will arrest Maya first. The paper trail is too perfect. We need proof of intent. We need a confession or something that links Vivian directly to the fraud. I will get it for you, I said. How Vivian is a shark. She won't talk. She will if she thinks she is losing the one thing she cares about more than money, I said. Her inheritance and her control. I outlined the plan to Marcus. He listened without interrupting. It is dangerous, Joseph, he said when I finished. If she is backed by the syndicate, these people kill for less than what she is stealing. I know, I said. That is why I need you listening. I am going to wire the house, live stream, direct to your server. Can you set that up? I can have a tech team there in an hour, unmarked van. We will tap into your existing security system and upgrade the audio feeds. Good. Be ready to move when I give the signal. I hung up and turned to Maya. Here is what we are going to do, I said. I am going to send a text to Vivian. I am going to tell her I am sick, a mini-stroke, disoriented, scared. Maya frowned. Why? Because predators attack the wounded, I said. I am going to tell her that I have had a moment of clarity, that I realize I have been unfair to you, and that I am changing my will. Maya's eyes widened. I am going to tell her I am leaving everything to you, I continued. The house, the accounts, and most importantly, the contents of this basement. She will go crazy, Maya whispered. Exactly. She thinks this house contains the evidence that can send her to prison. If she thinks I am giving it to you, she will have to act. She will have to come here and stop me. She will have to reveal herself. But what if she hurts you? She won't hurt me, I said. She needs me to sign the papers, or she needs me to die after she has secured the assets. But she will try to bully me, and she will try to destroy you. That is when we catch her. I stood up and walked over to the corner of the room. I picked up a small digital recorder. Lesson 1 in self-preservation, I said, handing it to Maya. Redundancy. Never rely on just one system. Marcus will be recording, but you need to be recording too. Keep this in your pocket. Do not turn it off. Okay, Maya said, taking the device. Her hand was trembling, but she closed her fingers around it tightly. Lesson 2, I said. Positioning. When she comes, I will be on the sofa. I want you to stand by the fireplace. Why? Maya thought for a moment. Because it is near the door. No, because it is in the blind spot of the hallway, I said. But it is directly in the line of sight of the hidden camera in the clock, and it forces her to turn her back to the window, where the police sniper can see her. Maya gasped. Sniper. We plan for the worst case, I said calmly. Always. We spent the next 2 hours prepping the house. It was like rigging a demolition site. Every angle had to be calculated. Every variable accounted for. I cleared the coffee table, leaving only a bottle of medicine and a glass of water to sell the sick old man act. I adjusted the angle of the grandfather clock in the living room, so the camera, hidden in its face, covered the entire seating area. Maya changed out of her uniform into a simple sweater and jeans I found in one of Eleanor's old trunks. She washed her face. She looked tired, but she looked like herself again. Not a victim, a survivor. You have to goad her, I told Maya as we stood in the kitchen. Vivian thinks you are weak. She thinks you are stupid. Use that. Ask dumb questions. Ask her about the money. Ask her about Mom. Make her explain it to you. Arrogant people love to explain their genius to people they think are beneath them. I can do that, Maya said. A hard glint appeared in her eyes. I have spent my whole life listening to her explain why she is better than me. Good. Make her say it. Make her say she did it. Make her say she stole your name. At 6 a.m., The tech team arrived. They were efficient, silent professionals. They upgraded the microphones in the living room, hiding them in the lampshades and under the sofa cushions. They verified the uplink to the police server. Audio is crystal clear, the lead tech said. Video is 1080p. We will see the sweat on her forehead. They left as quietly as they came. Now the bait. I sat on the sofa. I mussed my hair to look disheveled. I unbuttoned my collar. I practiced my stroke voice, slurred, weak, confused. I picked up my phone and typed the message to Vivian. Vivian. Feeling very weak. Doctor says maybe mini-stroke. Confused. Thinking about Mom. Realized I have been wrong about everything. Wrong about Maya. Calling lawyer tomorrow morning. Changing will. Giving house and everything to Maya. To make up for it. She needs it more. I am sorry. I stared at the screen. It was the perfect lure. It threatened her money. It threatened her secrets. And it struck at her ego the idea that the failure would get the prize. I hit send. Then I texted the lawyer, my real lawyer, who was in on the plan. Come at 9 a.m. sharp. Bring the papers. I put the phone down. Now we wait, I said to Maya. Do you think she will come? Maya asked. She is a narcissist, I said. And she is desperate. She won't just come. She will run. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Dad, do not do anything rash. I am coming over. We need to talk. Do not sign anything until I get there. I didn't reply. 20 minutes later, the sound of a high-performance engine roared up the driveway. Tires screeched on the asphalt. She was here. Places, I whispered to Maya. Maya moved to the fireplace. She stood tall, her chin up. She looked like a statue of justice waiting for the gavel to fall. I slumped onto the sofa, letting my mouth hang open slightly, my hands trembling on my lap. I was no longer Joseph Williams the engineer. I was Joseph Williams, the dying victim. The front door flew open. It wasn't unlocked, but Vivian had a key. She didn't knock. She stormed in. She was wearing a tracksuit, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She had clearly rushed out of bed, but her eyes were awake. Wide, frantic, dangerous eyes. She stopped in the archway of the living room. She saw me on the sofa. She saw Maya by the fire. The look of pure hatred she shot at Maya could have melted steel. What is she doing here? Vivian snapped, pointing a manicured finger at her sister. She lives here now, I mumbled, my speech deliberately slurred. My house is her house. Vivian marched into the room. She ignored me and got right in Maya's face. You little leech, she hissed. You poisoned him against me, didn't you? You told him lies to get his money. I didn't tell him anything, Maya said calmly. He just saw the truth, Vivian. Truth? Vivian laughed a harsh barking sound. You wouldn't know the truth if it hit you in the face. You are a junkie, Maya, a loser, and you are not getting this house. She turned to me, her face softening instantly into a mask of concern, though the rage still burned in her eyes. Dad, she said, kneeling beside me. Dad, listen to me. You are not well. You are confused. You cannot make legal decisions right now. You need rest. You need a doctor. I need to do what is right, I stammered. Maya, she has nothing. You have so much. You are rich, Viv. You don't need the house. It is not about the house, Vivian shouted, her mask slipping. It is about legacy. It is about what is mine. I built this family's reputation while she dragged it through the mud. You built it on lies, Maya said. And stolen steel. The room went dead silent. Vivian froze. She slowly turned her head to look at Maya. What did you say? She whispered. I said stolen steel, Maya repeated. Grade 40 scrap passed off as grade 60. Dad told me. Vivian looked at me. You told this idiot, about my business. I saw the cracks, Viv, I wheezed. Basement 3. The concrete. It is sand. Vivian stood up. She looked from me to Maya, calculating. She realized the game had changed. We weren't just talking about a will anymore. We were talking about her life. You two are insane, she said, backing away slightly. I am leaving, and I am calling a competency hearing, Dad. You are going into a home. No, Maya said. You are not leaving. Because we know about the room, Vivian. Vivian stopped. Her face went pale. The bunker, Maya said. Mom's office, we opened it. Vivian's eyes darted to the hallway, then back to us. You opened it, she asked, her voice trembling. We saw the maps, I said, sitting up a little straighter. We saw the invoices. We know you used Maya's name. Vivian stared at us. Then a strange thing happened. She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that realizes it doesn't have to hide anymore, because the prey is already in the water. So you know, she said. She walked over to the armchair and sat down, crossing her legs. Well, that simplifies things. Simplifies? I asked. I don't have to pretend to be the grieving daughter anymore, she said. Yes. I used her name. So what? You stole my identity, Maya said. You ruined my credit. You put me in debt to the cartel. I gave you a purpose, Vivian screamed. You were nothing. You were waiting tables and dating losers. I made you the CEO of 3 companies. You should thank me. For framing me. For being useful. Vivian stood up again, pacing the room. Do you have any idea how much pressure I am under? The syndicate. They don't ask nicely. I needed a clean name. I needed a ghost. You were perfect, Maya, invisible, pathetic. Nobody looks at you. Nobody. And Mom, I asked quietly. What about Mom? Vivian stopped pacing. She looked at the floor. Mom was a problem, she said. She found out. She wanted to tell you. I couldn't let her do that, Dad. You are too rigid. You would have called the police. You would have destroyed everything I worked for. So you killed her? Maya asked. I didn't kill her, Vivian said defensively. I just accelerated the inevitable. She had a bad heart. I took her pills. Just for a day. To scare her. To make her see reason. I didn't think she would actually die. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. It was an accident, Dad. But it had to happen. For the business. For the family. I did it for us. To keep the money coming in. I looked at my daughter. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She had admitted to fraud, to identity theft, to manslaughter, and she was recording every word of it on the hidden microphones. You are a monster, I said, dropping the act. My voice was strong, clear, and cold. Vivian blinked. She looked at me, realizing I wasn't slurring anymore. What? I said you are a monster, I repeated. And you are right. The structure is compromised. It has to come down. Vivian looked around the room. A dawn of realization was breaking over her face. The cleared table, the positioned furniture, my sudden recovery. You, she whispered, you are not sick. No, I said. I have never been clearer. She lunged for her purse. I am leaving. You are not going anywhere, I said. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. We have it all. Go. It is over, Vivian, I said. The police are listening. They heard everything. Vivian froze. She looked at the clock. She looked at the lamp. She looked at Maya, who was holding up the digital recorder. You set me up, she screamed. She reached into her purse. I expected a phone. She pulled out a gun. A small, snub-nosed revolver. No, Maya screamed. Vivian pointed the gun at me. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were wild. You think you can trap me, she shrieked. I am Vivian Williams. I built this city. I am not going to jail because of you old fools. Vivian, I said, holding up my hands. Put it down. The house is surrounded. Liar, she screamed. You are bluffing. You always bluff. I am an engineer, I said calmly. I never guess. I calculate. Sirens wailed in the distance. Getting closer, fast. Vivian's eyes widened. She heard them too. She looked at the door. Then, she looked at Maya. If I go down, she hissed, turning the gun toward her sister. I am taking the liability with me. Drop it, I shouted, lunging forward. But I was 66 years old. I wasn't fast enough. Vivian pulled the trigger. The headlights swept across the living room ceiling like searchlights in a prison yard. It was not morning yet. I had baited the trap with the promise of a changed will, and Vivian, true to her nature, had not waited for sunrise. She had come immediately to secure her kill. I lay back against the cushions of the sofa, adjusting the blanket over my legs. I let my mouth hang open slightly, relaxing my facial muscles to mimic the slackness of a man whose mind is slipping away. It was a performance I had never wanted to give, but it was the only weapon left in my arsenal. Maya stood by the fireplace. She was trembling not from cold, but from the sheer terror of what was about to happen. Remember, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Let her talk. Do not interrupt. Just ask questions. Maya nodded, gripping the digital recorder in her pocket. The front door did not just open, it was thrown wide. The cold night air rushed in, followed by the click-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor. Vivian marched into the foyer, but she was not alone. Behind her trailed a man in a sharp charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. Arthur Sterling, her personal attorney, a man who specialized in making problems and money disappear. Vivian swept into the living room, her eyes wild, scanning the scene. She saw me on the sofa looking frail and confused. She saw Maya standing defensively by the hearth. Dad! Vivian cried out, her voice, pitched in a perfect register of panicked concern. She rushed to my side, kneeling on the rug. Oh my God, Dad! I got your text. Are you okay? I brought Arthur. We need to handle this right now. I blinked at her slowly, playing for time. Vivian, is that you? It is late. It is never too late for family, Joseph, Arthur Sterling said, stepping forward. He had a voice like oiled silk. Vivian tells me you are feeling unwell, that you want to make some urgent changes to your estate. Yes, I croaked. Changes. Big changes. Vivian stood up and turned to Maya. The mask of concern vanished instantly, replaced by a sneer of pure disgust. What is she doing here? Vivian demanded, pointing a manicured finger at her sister. Did you break in? Did you give him something to make him confused? I am taking care of him, Maya said, her voice shaking but holding firm. He called me Vivian. He told me the truth. The truth? Vivian laughed, a harsh barking sound. You wouldn't know the truth if it bit you. You are a junkie, Maya. Look at you. You probably came here to steal his silverware to pay your dealer. She turned back to me, grabbing my hand. Her grip was tight, painful. Dad, listen to me, she said, urgent and fast. You are not thinking clearly. It is the stroke. You are confused. Maya is dangerous. She is an addict. If you give her the house, if you give her control, she will sell it for pennies. She will smoke it away in a week. You cannot let her destroy your legacy. I looked at my daughter. She was beautiful, successful, and utterly rotten. She is not the one destroying things, I wheezed. Of course she is, Vivian shouted, losing her patience. She is a failure, Dad, a leech. She has never built anything in her life. Arthur, Vivian snapped at the lawyer. Get the papers out, the power of attorney. We need him to sign over temporary conservatorship to me. Tonight. Before he does something insane. Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Mr. Williams, Sterling said, uncapping a gold pen. This is just a formality. Given your medical condition, it is best if Vivian handles your affairs until you recover. Just sign here. He thrust the paper in front of my face. I looked at the paper. It was a death warrant for my freedom. If I signed that she could lock me away in a facility and bury the bunker under a layer of concrete forever. I pushed the paper away with a weak hand. No, I said. Vivian's eyes widened. What do you mean no dad signed the paper? I cannot, I said. Not until I clear my conscience. Not until I talk about the drawings. Vivian froze. What drawings? The steel drawings, I whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I saw them, Viv. The basement. The invoices. You are using grade 40 steel. The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling looked at Vivian. He was a crook, but he was a careful crook. He knew that specific construction details were not the ramblings of a senile man. Vivian, Sterling asked. What is he talking about? Vivian's face had gone the color of chalk. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of exposure. He is hallucinating, Vivian said quickly, her voice too high. It is the medication. He is talking nonsense. It didn't look like nonsense, I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. It looked like fraud. $16 million of fraud. Sterling snapped his briefcase shut. He took a step back. Vivian, he said coldly, if there is actual exposure here, if he has seen documents. Shut up, Arthur, Vivian screamed. She turned on him, her eyes blazing. Get out, wait in the car. I advise against discussing. I said get out, she shrieked. This is family business, go. Sterling did not need to be told twice. He was a lawyer, not a co-conspirator to a confessed crime. He nodded once to me, turned on his heel and walked out the front door, closing it softly behind him. Now we were alone. Vivian stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. The mask was gone. The concern was gone. The polished executive was gone. What remained was a cornered animal. She turned to me slowly. Her eyes were cold, dead things. You old fool, she hissed. You checked. You actually checked. I am an engineer, I said, my voice gaining a little more strength, though I stayed slumped on the couch. I checked the foundation. That is what I do. You were supposed to be retired, Vivian shouted, throwing her hands up. You were supposed to be playing golf and drinking scotch. Why couldn't you just stay in your lane? Because you put my name on a tombstone, I said. Vivian laughed. It was a terrifying sound, devoid of any humor. She walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured herself a drink, her hands shaking slightly. She downed it in one gulp and turned back to us. You think you know everything, she said, sneering. You think because you built a few towers in the 80s that you understand this business. You know nothing, Dad. You are a dinosaur. I know that steel has a yield point, I said, and I know you crossed it. Nobody cares about the steel, Vivian yelled. Wake up. This is the 21st century. We do not build with concrete anymore. We build with debt. We build with leverage. That tower isn't a building, it is a financial instrument. It is an asset class. It is a place where people sleep, Maya said from the fireplace. It is a place where families live. Vivian spun around to face her sister. Oh, shut up, Maya. You sound like a greeting card. You think the world runs on good intentions? It runs on money. And I was making us a fortune. By stealing, Maya asked. By laundering money for a cartel. Vivian didn't even flinch. She walked closer to Maya, towering over her. By doing what was necessary, Vivian spat. I was in a hole. A temporary liquidity crisis. I fixed it. I found a partner. Yes, their money was dirty. So what? Once it goes through the construction budget, it comes out clean. I was washing it for them and they were funding the expansion. It was a perfect system until you two started digging. You used my name, Maya said. You put me on the documents. Vivian rolled her eyes. Of course I used your name. Who else was I going to use? My own. I have a reputation to protect. I have a board of directors watching me. So I was disposable, Maya asked, her voice cracking. You were useless, Vivian corrected her. Let us be honest, Maya. You have been a drain on this family for 10 years. You wait tables. You have a kid you cannot afford. You are a zero, a non-entity. Vivian smirked a cruel twist of her red lips. I gave you value, she said. I took your worthless credit score and I turned it into a vehicle for millions of dollars. I made you a CEO, Maya, even if you didn't know it. If the tower went up and the money came through, I would have taken care of you. I would have paid off your little debts. But if it went wrong, well, she shrugged. That is the division of labor, Vivian said coldly. I provide the brains. You provide the liability. That is all you were ever good for. I gripped the cushion of the sofa. It took every ounce of my willpower not to stand up and strike her. But I needed more. I needed the final piece. You are evil, Maya whispered. I am pragmatic, Vivian said. Survival of the fittest. Dad understands that. Don't you, Dad? She looked at me expecting me to agree with her twisted logic. I understand that a chain breaks at its weakest link, I said softly. But I never thought the weak link was your soul, Vivian, Vivian sneered. Save the sermon. So what happens now? You are going to blackmail me, is that it? You want to cut, fine. I can cut you in. There is enough for everyone. We don't want your money, Maya said. We want to know about Mom. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Vivian paused. She looked at the glass in her hand. What about Mom? She asked, her voice dropping. She knew, I said. She left a letter. She said she confronted you. She said she was going to the police. Vivian turned away from us, looking out the dark window. She was stubborn, Vivian muttered. Just like you. She wouldn't listen to reason. I tried to explain the finances to her. I tried to tell her that if she went to the cops, we would all go down. The syndicate doesn't leave witnesses, Dad. If Mom talked, they would have come for me. They would have come for you. So you stopped her, Maya said. Vivian turned back. Her face was hard, unrepentant. She was sick, Maya. She had a bad heart. She was in pain. You stopped her, Maya repeated. I helped her, Vivian shouted. She was hysterical. She was going to pick up the phone and destroy this family. I couldn't let her do that. So I made sure she couldn't make the call. How? I asked. My voice was a whisper, but it echoed like a gunshot in the silent house. Vivian looked at me. She saw a broken old man. She saw no threat. She saw only a priest in a confessional. She needed rest, Vivian said quietly. Her heart pills, digoxins. If you skip a few doses, the heart gets weak. It gets tired. And if you add a little stress, a little argument, nature takes its course. I closed my eyes. I felt a tear leak out and slide down my cheek. It wasn't acting. You hid her medicine, I said. I cleaned up her nightstand, Vivian corrected. I put the pills in the drawer instead of on the table. If she really wanted to live, she could have looked for them. But she was weak. She gave up. Vivian smiled, a chilling, self-satisfied smile. I didn't kill her, Dad. I just let her go. It was a mercy. For her and for us. And now we are free to move forward. She walked over to the sofa and sat down on the coffee table, leaning in close to my face. So here's the deal, she said. You are going to sign those papers Arthur brought. You are going to let me handle the business. And in exchange, I will pay off Maya's debts. I will buy you that boat you always wanted. And we will never talk about the basement again. She patted my hand. That is fair, right? That is what is best for the family. I opened my eyes. I looked at the daughter I had raised, the daughter I had loved, and I saw nothing but a void. Vivian, I said, you are right about one thing. What is that? She asked. This is the 21st century, I said. And we do not just build with concrete anymore. I sat up. I stopped slouching. The weakness vanished from my body. I looked her straight in the eye, my gaze sharp and clear. We build with technology, I said. Vivian frowned, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. What? I pointed to the grandfather clock behind her. Lesson 1 in engineering, I said, my voice strong and steady. Always have a backup system. Vivian turned. She saw the tiny red light blinking inside the face of the clock. What is that? She whispered. That, I said, standing up from the sofa, is a direct uplink to the Chicago Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. And Captain Marcus just heard every word you said. Vivian leaped to her feet. She looked at the clock. She looked at me. She looked at Maya, who pulled the digital recorder from her pocket and held it up. I got it too, Maya said. Division of Labor, Vivian. You talk. We record. You, Vivian gasped. You set me up. You set yourself up, I said. You were so arrogant you thought you could confess to murder and buy your way out of it. Vivian backed away, her face twisting into a mask of pure terror. No, she said. No, you can't. I am your daughter. You stopped being my daughter when you killed your mother, I said. Now you are just a structural failure, and I am condemning the building. Vivian looked at the door. She looked at her purse on the table. Arthur, she screamed. Arthur. Arthur is gone, I said, and the police are here. Outside, the night was suddenly illuminated by flashing blue and red lights. The wail of sirens cut through the air, drowning out her scream. Vivian ran to the window. She saw the squad cars blocking the driveway. She saw the tactical team moving across the lawn. She turned back to us, trapped. You ruined everything, she shrieked. We could have been rich. We are already rich, I said, putting my arm around Maya. We have the truth. That is the only currency that matters. Vivian slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She covered her face with her hands. The monster was gone. Only a scared, broken criminal remained. And as the pounding started on the front door, I looked at Maya. She wasn't trembling anymore. She was standing tall. The foundation had held. The front door did not open. It exploded inward. The sound was like a thunderclap of violent wooden crack that shook the entire house and drowned out the wail of the sirens. Splinters of oak flew across the foyer as the battering ram did its work. Federal agents, police, get on the ground now. The voices were a wall of sound, overlapping and deafening. Men in tactical gear with heavy vests and rifles poured into the hallway, a river of dark blue, moving with terrifying speed and precision. Vivian screamed. It was not a scream of fear, but of pure feral rage. She scrambled backward, knocking over the coffee table, sending the glass of water shattering across the floor. The shards glittered in the chaotic flashing of the red and blue lights that pulsed through the windows. I stood up from the sofa. The act of the frail old man was gone. My legs were steady. My heart was pounding, not from panic, but from the adrenaline of the controlled demolition. I watched my daughter, the woman who had once been my pride, turn into a trapped animal. She looked at the front door, blocked by a wall of agents. She looked at the window, where I knew a sniper was positioned. Then she looked at the hallway leading to the kitchen, and to the basement door. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She knew the recording was damning. She knew her confession was already on a server at the police station. But she also knew that the physical evidence, the original ledgers, the forged stamps, the hard drives with the cartel's crypto keys was downstairs in the bunker. If she could get down there, if she could trigger the incendiary failsafe she surely had installed, or simply smash the drives, she might destroy the chain of custody. She might create enough doubt to bargain for a plea deal. She bolted. "Stop her!" Maya yelled, stepping forward. But Vivian was fast. She kicked off her high heels and sprinted toward the kitchen hallway, moving with a desperate athleticism. "She is going for the vault!" I shouted to the lead agent. Vivian reached the heavy oak door that led to the basement stairs. She grabbed the handle. It was locked. She punched the keypad mounted on the frame. Her fingers flew across the buttons. I knew the code she was typing. It was her birthday. The same code she used for everything. Beep, 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 buzz. The red light on the lock flashed. Denied. She froze. She typed it again, faster, harder. Beep, 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 buzz. "Open!" she screamed, slamming her fist against the keypad. "Open, damn you!" She turned around, her back pressed against the door, her chest heaving. She looked across the room at me. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "It does not work," she gasped. "I changed the code, Vivian," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I changed it yesterday. Lesson number 1 in security. Never keep the factory settings." "You," she snarled. "You locked me out." "I locked you out," I said. "And I locked the evidence in. The structure has collapsed, Vivian. There is nowhere left to run." 2 agents were on her in seconds. "Vivian Williams." Captain Marcus shouted, stepping through the ruined front doorway. He was wearing a Kevlar vest over his suit, his gun drawn, but pointed at the floor. "Hands behind your back, do it now." Vivian did not surrender. She fought. She lashed out, scratching at the face of the nearest agent, kicking and screaming. It was an ugly, undignified end. It took 3 of them to pin her to the floor. They forced her arms back, and the metallic click-click of the handcuffs signaled the end of her reign. "Get off me!" she shrieked, her face pressed against the hardwood floor where she used to play as a child. "You are making a mistake. I am the victim here. It is her. It is Maya." She craned her neck, spitting venom at her sister. "Check the papers," Vivian yelled, her voice raw. "Check the corporate filings. Everything is in her name. I am just a consultant. Maya Williams is the CEO. She is the one laundering the money. She set me up to take the fall." Captain Marcus walked over to her. He holstered his weapon and looked down. His face was grim. "We know whose name is on the papers, Ms. Williams," Marcus said calmly. "And we also know who forged them. We heard your conversation. We have your confession on tape. You admitted to identity theft. You admitted to wire fraud. And you admitted to negligent homicide regarding your mother." "I was under duress," Vivian shouted, thrashing against the restraints. "He threatened me. My father threatened me. It is entrapment." "It is justice," Marcus said. He signaled to his men. "Get her out of here." They hauled her to her feet. Her cashmere tracksuit was torn. Her hair was wild. She looked at me as they dragged her toward the door. "Dad," she pleaded, the anger suddenly turning to desperate bargaining. "Dad, tell them. Tell them I was just trying to save the company. I did it for us. I can fix this. I have money. I can pay for the best lawyers. Do not let them take me." I looked at her. I saw the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to draw bridges. I saw the young woman who graduated top of her class. And I saw the monster who had killed my wife and tortured my other daughter. It was the hardest moment of my life. Every instinct in my body wanted to save my child, to write a check, to call a favor, to fix the crack in the wall. But this crack was too deep. "You cannot fix this, Vivian," I said softly. "You built your life on sand. And now the storm is here." I turned my back on her. "No, Dad. Look at me, Dad." Her screams faded as they dragged her out into the night. I stood there staring at the empty fireplace. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Maya. She was crying, but they were not tears of fear. She buried her face in my shoulder, and I wrapped my arms around her. I held her tight, tighter than I had held her in 20 years. She felt so small, so fragile, yet she had been stronger than any of us. She had carried the weight of Vivian's crimes for a decade without breaking. "It is over," I whispered into her hair. "She is gone. You are safe." "I thought she was going to shoot you," Maya sobbed. "When she pulled the gun, I thought I lost you." "I am not going anywhere," I said. "I am right here. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Captain Marcus walked over to us. He looked tired, but satisfied. "We got the others," he said. My team picked up Arthur Sterling in the driveway. He was trying to hide his briefcase under the spare tire of his car. We found 3 passports and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands inside. "And Henderson?" I asked. "The site director, FBI SWAT, hit the construction trailer 10 minutes ago," Marcus said. "They caught him shredding documents. He gave up the moment they breached the door. He is already trying to cut a deal. He says he can give us the names of the syndicate contacts." "Good," I said. "Burn it all down. Every single rat in the nest." "We will need statements," Marcus said gently. "From both of you. But it can wait until morning. You two look like you have been through a war." "We have," I said. "And we won." Marcus nodded and stepped away to coordinate with the crime scene unit. I walked Maya to the window. The front lawn was a sea of activity. Neighbors were standing on their porches wrapped in bathrobes watching the spectacle. The flashing lights illuminated the snowflakes that had started to fall, drifting down like white ash. I saw them putting Vivian into the back of a squad car. She was still shouting, kicking at the window. She looked small and pathetic, caged in the back of that vehicle. I felt a sharp physical pain in my chest. A father's love does not just vanish even when his child becomes a monster. It just changes. It turns into a heavy, aching stone that you have to carry for the rest of your life. "Are you okay, Dad?" Maya asked, squeezing my hand. I looked at her. I saw the bruise on her spirit healing already. I saw the relief in her eyes. "No," I said honestly. "I am not okay. I just sent my daughter to prison. I just watched my family implode. But I did the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than doing the wrong thing." "You saved me," Maya said. "That is what matters." "I should have saved you sooner," I said. "I should have seen it." "You saw it now," she said. "That is enough." I looked back at the house. The front door was smashed. The furniture was overturned. Muddy boot prints covered the expensive rugs. It was a ruin. But for the first time in 8 months since Eleanor died, the house did not feel haunted. It felt clean. The lies had been scrubbed out by the harsh light of truth. "We cannot stay here tonight," I said. "Not with the door broken and the police crawling everywhere." "We can go to a hotel," Maya suggested. "No," I said. "Pack a bag. We are going to get Leo." Maya's eyes widened. "Leo. He is staying with your neighbor, right?" "Yes." "We are going to pick him up," I said. "And we are going to get breakfast. The best pancakes in Chicago. And then we are going to start rebuilding." "Rebuilding what?" Maya asked. "Everything," I said. "The foundation is solid now, Maya. We just have to clear the debris." I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up the photo of Eleanor. In the chaos, it had remained untouched. She was smiling in the picture, that mysterious, knowing smile. "We did it, Elle," I whispered. "You gave us the blueprints. We just had to do the work." I put the photo in my pocket. As we walked out of the house, past the yellow crime scene tape, past the staring neighbors, I did not look back at the squad car. I looked at Maya. I looked at the future. The tower of lies that Vivian built had fallen. The crash had been loud and violent. But as I stepped out into the cold morning air, I realized something profound. When a building collapses, it clears the sky. It lets the light back in. And for the first time in 40 years, I could see the horizon clearly. There were no more obstructions, no more false structures blocking the view. Just the cold, clean truth, and the hand of the daughter who had never let go of mine, even when I tried to pull away. We walked to my car. I opened the door for Maya. "Dad," she said, pausing. "What about the building, the real one? The Millennium Tower?" "It is finished," I said. "The city inspectors will be there at 8 a.m. With the evidence we have, they will condemn it by noon. It will never be occupied. They will tear it down piece by piece." "It seems like a waste," she said softly. "All that concrete, all that work." "It is not a waste," I said, starting the engine. "It is a lesson. You cannot build a legacy on a lie. It doesn't matter how high you go. If the concrete is rotten, the fall is inevitable. I pulled out of the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel one last time. I drove past the police barricade, past the life I had known, and turned onto the main road. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the gray sky with streaks of pink and gold. It was a new day. A hard day, yes. A painful day. But a true one. And as I drove toward the city to meet my grandson, I knew that for the first time in a long time, I was heading in the right direction. The load was heavy, but the structure, the real structure of this family, could finally bear the weight. It has been 3 months since the night the front door was kicked in. 3 months since the sirens woke the neighborhood and the flashing lights painted the snow red and blue. Time in the legal system usually moves like a glacier, but when the evidence is as solid as the concrete columns I used to design, things move with terrifying speed. I stood in the back of the federal courtroom yesterday. The air smelled of floor wax and old wood. Vivian stood at the defense table. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that washed out her complexion, making her look sickly and pale. Her hair, which used to be her crowning glory, was pulled back in a severe knot. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the table, staring at her handcuffed wrists. The charges were overwhelming: racketeering, wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering for a known criminal enterprise. But the charge that nailed the coffin shut was involuntary manslaughter. The recording of her admitting to tampering with Eleanor's heart medication played in open court. The jury did not need to deliberate for long. The judge was a stern woman with eyes like flint. She looked at Vivian not with anger, but with a disappointment one reserves for a waste of human potential. She sentenced Vivian to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge cited the depraved indifference to human life shown by the construction materials fraud and the calculating cruelty toward her own vulnerable mother. As the bailiffs led her away, Vivian stopped. She turned her head and looked at me. For a moment I expected her to scream or to beg, but she just looked at me with dead empty eyes. She had gambled everything on the structure of lies she had built, and when it collapsed, it took her soul with it. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind her, and just like that, my eldest daughter was gone. The Millennium Tower is gone too. Or at least it is going. The city inspectors condemned the site less than 24 hours after I handed over the core samples. It stands there now, like a skeleton against the Chicago skyline, a monument to greed wrapped in yellow caution tape. Demolition crews are already setting up the cranes to dismantle it, piece by piece. It will cost millions to tear it down, but that is the price of safety. Every time I drive past it, I do not feel sadness. I feel relief. It is better to tear down a bad building than to bury the people who live inside it. Maya stood beside me in the courtroom. She held my hand the entire time. She was not the same woman who had huddled in the bunker 3 months ago. She stood straight. She wore a tailored suit that we bought together. The exoneration was total. The district attorney publicly apologized to her. The banks restored her credit. The IRS lifted the liens. Vivian's assets were seized by the government, but because Maya was a victim of identity theft and fraud, she received a significant settlement from the restitution fund. It was not a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to pay off her debts. Enough to put Leo in a good private school. Enough to breathe. She is going back to school in the fall. Business administration. I am not going to let a degree define me, Dad, she told me over coffee last week. But I want to understand the language. I want to make sure nobody can ever use a spreadsheet to lie to me again. I smiled. That is the engineer in her coming out. Trust but verify. We sold the mansion on Monroe Street. I could not spend another night in that mausoleum. Too many ghosts walked those halls. The memory of Vivian ransacking Eleanor's room and the echo of the police battering ram were too loud. We sold it to a developer who plans to knock it down and build 4 smaller family homes. I think Eleanor would have liked that. We bought a place in Evanston. It is a bungalow, brick, single story, solid foundation. It is messy. There are Lego bricks on the living room floor, and Leo's drawings are taped to the refrigerator. It smells of bacon in the morning and laundry detergent in the afternoon. It is half the size of the old house, but it feels twice as big because it is filled with life. I have found a new purpose too. I retired from building skyscrapers, but I have not stopped working. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening I go to the local community center. I teach a free class. I call it Structural Integrity in Life in Concrete. I teach homeowners how to spot a shady contractor. I teach them how to read a contract. I teach them that if a deal looks too good to be true, it is because the supporting beams are made of balsa wood. The class is always full. People are hungry for truth. They are tired of being tricked. Yesterday, after the sentencing, Maya and I drove to the cemetery. The spring thaw has finally come. The grass is turning green again, and the air smells of wet earth and new beginnings. We stood over Eleanor's grave. It is a simple stone granite, polished to a mirror shine. I did not bring flowers. Eleanor always said cut flowers were a waste of money because they just died. Instead, I brought a roll of paper. I knelt down and unrolled the blueprints on the grass. "Look at this, Elle," I whispered. It was a design for a new project. Not a tower, not a monument to ego. It was a school. "Maya wants to open a learning center for kids who fall through the cracks," I said, tracing the lines on the paper. Kids like she was. Kids who are smart and artistic but who don't fit into the mold. "We are going to build it right. Reinforced concrete, grade 60 steel, solar panels on the roof. It will stand for 100 years. We are calling it the Eleanor Williams School for the Arts." Maya knelt beside me. She touched the cold stone of the headstone. "We did it, Mom," she said softly. "We cleaned the house." I looked at my daughter and my grandson who was running in the distance chasing a squirrel. I thought about the journey we had taken. I thought about the lies I had swallowed for decades. People often say that family is everything. They say you must protect your blood at all costs. They say loyalty is the highest virtue. But Eleanor taught me a different definition of self-preservation. For 40 years I thought self-preservation meant keeping the peace. It meant ignoring the cracks to keep the facade looking pretty. I thought it meant protecting Vivian's reputation even when I suspected she was cold. I thought it meant judging Maya's struggles so I did not have to feel responsible for them. I was wrong. Self-preservation is not about hiding the rot. It is about surgery. It is about having the courage to pick up the scalpel and cut out the infection even if that infection is your own flesh and blood. You cannot save the body if you let the gangrene spread. I lost a daughter. I will mourn Vivian for the rest of my life. I will mourn the child she was before the greed took her. But by cutting her out, I saved the rest of us. I saved Maya. I saved Leo. I saved the memory of the woman I loved. And I saved my own soul. If I had stayed silent, if I had signed those papers to keep the peace, the tower would have collapsed. People would have died. And I would have been buried under the rubble of my own cowardice. I rolled up the blueprints. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my knees. The wind was brisk coming off the lake, but it felt clean. I looked at the inscription on the headstone. Eleanor Williams. She saw the truth. I put my hand on the stone one last time. "You were right, Elle," I said. I finally stopped coming alone. I brought her. I took Maya's hand. We walked back to the car together, leaving the dead to rest and walking toward the living. Do not be like the man I was. Do not let your pride blind you to the cracks in your own foundation. If you are living this kind of true story right now, if you suspect that someone close to you is drilling holes in your life, do not close your eyes. Do not wait for the roof to cave in. Self-preservation means choosing the truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Thank you for listening to my story. I am Joseph Williams, and this is my truth. If you are listening to this story right now, I want to know where you are. Are you in your car driving home from work? Are you in your kitchen making dinner for your family? Are you sitting in the dark wondering if you have the strength to face your own monsters? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your voice. And if this story moved you, if it made you look at your own walls a little closer, please subscribe to the channel Bittersweet Revenge. Like this video and hit that hype button so we can share this warning with more people. Sometimes, the only way to build a better future is to tear down the lies of the past. Stay safe and watch your foundation.